Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Holy Trinity this morning. It's great to be together in worship today. Special welcome to any of you who might be guests or visitors with us this morning. We're grateful you're here. Please know that we're glad you're here and hope you introduce yourself to someone this morning. And know that when it comes to Holy Communion, you are all welcome to partake at the Lord's table. We continue our focus this year, Vision 2020 efforts, our project as we look through the year. We have looked backward at our history. We're now looking inward at the gifts of the congregation and listening inside the congregation. Our next move will be looking outward and then finally looking forward to our future as a church with clarity that is 2020 clear. So right now we're focused on looking inward, and part of that is we have a one-on-one listening initiative going on in the congregation. So you are either welcome to look on the bulletin board and seek out a one-on-one, or people will also be calling and inviting. It's just a chance to listen to you. So please know there's no ulterior motive. It's simply to listen. Also want you to know, as we look inward, we have multiple small group studies for adults going on, and there are two happening today, one immediately after the service in the fireside room, and one later on this evening at 5:30, also in the same room. You can find more information in your bulletin on that, and also many other things coming up, so please do read your bulletin. Also want you to know our mission of the month is the Christmas giving tree in the back gathering space, so if you'd like to partake in that, you can look for the particular needs we have in the community and see if it can match a gift you would like to give. I think that's our focus for now. I'll invite you to stand as we begin in worship together.
A reading from Isaiah, the 5th chapter. Let me sing for my beloved, my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it. He expected it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now, inhabitants of Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard than I have not done in it? When I expected it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste. It shall not be pruned or hoed, and it shall be overgrown with briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that there rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant planting. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed, righteousness, but heard a cry. A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. Then the Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with his rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. The word of the Lord.
So this season of looking inward, as we're having these one-on-one conversations, we're also hoping to model in worship this example of being in dialogue and going deeper in conversation as we have these dialogue sermons. But I want to start by just saying a huge thank you to Rose and her willingness to do this, but also just name that this is a little, I think, out of both of our comfort zones as two introverts having a conversation in front of a whole community. So thank you, and please have some grace this morning. But I do think we have a privilege this morning to hear from a dear partner and friend, and a story about how I believe God has something to share with each of us today. So I want to start by just getting to know you a little bit, Rose, so that we can all know who you are and connect with you. But would you share, what's your involvement or what's your role here at Holy Trinity for those who don't know?
So obviously I'm on the music team. I also coordinate special music. So if we have any young people or not so young people who want to sing or play, please come let me know. I also do our mission outreach coordination, so when we have missions of the month, or we do drives for shoes, etc., that was me and my team.
And you're helping us listen really well, I think, to the community and the world and what the needs are, helping us move forward. How about other roles you hold or things that we might not know about you that are important to you?
Sure, I have 4 jobs. I don't recommend this. Don't ever try to do this. But I do marketing and communications for a church in Le Sueur, and then I still run a small studio, along with my jobs here.
And how about, would you like to share anything about your family or other loves you might have in your
Sure.
life?
So my husband, Jason, and I have 2 children. Sorry, mind. Okay, we have 2 children. Liam is a sophomore at UMD, and Maddie is a senior at New Prague High School. Oh, and the one-eyed dog, Bear.
A lovely dog. And I think there might be some other enjoyments in your life or passions in your life. What might they be?
So I love to read, I love to make chocolate, and I love to run off that chocolate.
Best chocolates around. So as we mentioned, we're in this great sermon series that we're calling Conversations, these dialogue sermons. We're trying something new, partially because this is the time when the prophets come up for our scripture lessons, and sometimes prophets are a little hard to relate to our life, and so we thought this might be one way we can relate them to what's going on in our own lives. But often we think about prophets as being kind of like fortune tellers, but we want you to think about them more as truth tellers. So instead of fortune tellers, more like truth tellers. And today we're particularly looking at Isaiah, and Isaiah has one of the biggest writings, of course, about him, but also it's this complicated book that's sometimes known as actually being 3 different books within one, and it's known for using a lot of poetic imagery. So we heard the reading just a few minutes ago, but it's layered with meaning, and I think it's only fitting today that Rose, as a writer herself, is the one to help us unpack it, who has such an appreciation for the written word. So, but what I want you to hear today is that in Isaiah, there's particularly 3 parts, if we really simplify it down. It's a big dream, God's big dream, it's a broken dream, and then there's promise for a renewed dream from God. So a dream, a broken dream, and then God's renewed dream, new hope from God. So we're going to start with the dream part first today. So Isaiah, as you heard it read, has this beautiful image, this beautiful dream of a vineyard. And as we heard it read, this dream had all the parts set to go to come to fruition. The vineyard had great solid soil. It was fertile. It was cleared of all the stones that could have gotten in the way. It was planted with only the choice vines, and there was even a watchtower built in case any threat came, that we could do away with threats. So mathematically, everything was there for this vineyard to be incredibly fruitful and produce what could have been a dream. And I think it's kind of like the way we paint pictures of our own vineyards in your life. So I want you to think about the dreams in your own life. We have hopes sometimes or dreams for what retirement might look like. We have hopes or dreams what a relationship might be like. We have hopes or dreams of what maybe having children might look like, or what our children will be like. So I want to start today by asking you, Rose, tell us about a vision for a vineyard in your life, or a dream that you've had.
Okay, so probably like all the musicians up here, from the moment I first heard music, I knew I wanted to be a musician. I thought musicians were superheroes to me. I couldn't understand how they could stay together, how they could make sounds the way that they made, and how they could make people feel and emote. And, you know, when you meet these, forgive me, very stern, crusty sort of type of people, and suddenly they're crying at funerals because the pianist has played well, or, you know, someone has sung well, or the guitarist has done well, I wanted to know how to do that. So, unfortunately, though, we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. My parents are wonderful, very hardworking, brilliant, educated people, but for many reasons, we just didn't have a lot. So there wasn't money for lessons. I asked, it just wasn't there. So my grandmother had played the flute, and so she handed me her flute, put it on my face, and said, as soon as you can make a sound, I will give you lessons. And she said, you're next in line. And she then told me that generations and generations going back to Scotland and Ireland, we had flutists, and that's who we were, and that's what you do. So I believed her. Family lore is that one of these flutists was the founding flutist in the Minneapolis Orchestra, but that's family lore. I think we all have these stories that, get spun and spun, so I don't know if it's true or not. Eventually, my parents were able to afford piano lessons, so I started with a very lovely, kind woman, the woman with whom I base all of my teaching on. Just kindness, generous love, patience, hopefully patience. Eventually we moved again, and this time I met and heard a professional flutist. She was a flutist with the Des Moines Symphony, and I'd never heard the flute make that sound. No offense to my grandmother, but it was a professional sound. It was just a very different sound. So I thought that was the way I was supposed to go. So I started taking lessons with her. But unfortunately, when you don't start professional lessons until 9, to be a musician, that's late. It's very, very late, unfortunately. So I knew I was behind. I knew I'd have to work hard. So I just practiced and practiced and practiced. Unfortunately, I practiced the wrong instrument. I was practicing piano instead of flute for years. But that didn't seem to occur to me until later. So I got through high school. That teacher was not as supportive. Let's just put it that way. I auditioned for undergrad and got in, much to my surprise. And I loved undergrad because suddenly I was studying music all the time. I was playing, I was on my instrument 7 to 8 hours a day. It was heaven. And there was always this wall of sound around me all the time, and it was just beautiful. It's also, that moment when you find your people, right? When you get there and all these people care about, they get as excited as you do about Rachmaninoff Prelude in C-sharp minor or Brahms Requiem or, all these things. Yeah, I know, you guys are laughing. And that moment when you find your people is very liberating because you get to be yourself more than you ever have. Let's say in the past, you just are 10% of yourself, but these people are just as happy as you to talk about these things. During undergrad, I met my husband, Jason, and we eventually got married and started our family. But I always knew that though I loved my family, I wasn't done. I knew I needed personally more education, partly because I started late and partly because I just love education. So I desperately missed classes. I missed rehearsals, desperately missed rehearsals. So I decided to audition for the master's program at a music conservatory, and surprisingly, was accepted. But for the last 10 years, I'd played in a few ensembles, I'd played at weddings, I'd taught some lessons, I'd read books about composers, I'd looked at, the chord structure of a Bach flute sonata. But largely, I was a mother. I was very interested in taking care of my family and being there for them. So now I go to grad school. I was 10 years older than the average grad student. I was even more behind than I thought I was originally because I'd been, playing mom. Eventually, I was reminded, pretty quickly, I was reminded of this on a very consistent basis. I'm always behind. I'm always behind. You're always behind. You're not working hard enough. You're not doing enough. So this time, though, I had 2 kids. I had a studio full of students who had needs, emotional and physical, and I had a 2-hour commute. But however, I thought, I can do this, I can work really hard, I can just sleep less and do more because this is my dream in life and this is what I always wanted. So that was my dream.
Okay, so in Isaiah, again, all the makings for a dream come true were there, but it turns out that A plus B, even though it should have equaled C, didn't. All the ingredients were right for a successful, ripe vineyard, and yet it did not produce delicious grapes, it produced wild grapes. And in many ways, it was a broken dream. And after jumping into this music program, Rose, what became of this dream for you?
So first I was just tired. It was beautiful and it was chaotic and it was crazy. And again, I'm around musicians and I'm around rehearsals, and there's just always this beautiful wall of sound at all times. But because I was behind, I knew I would have to practice longer, so I did that, and I slept less, and I wrote papers until it was time to get the kids up for school. And I did that 2-hour commute, sometimes twice, because you have to be there for the night meetings. So 4 hours in the car was a lot in the car. I put all of my recital pieces on my iPod, so I was listening to them while I was running, I was listening to them in the car. I was working on double tonguing. It's a fluid thing, don't worry about that. But I was oddly practicing while carpooling. When I would drop kids off for brownies or soccer or whatever, I was practicing in the car. So I wasn't very social at that time. I tried very hard to be present for my children. I wanted to be, and my family. I wanted to be there for them, but I also wanted to be present for my own inner voice and my own needs that said, I've always wanted this from the time I was tiny, and I wanted to have it. So grad school was, I both loved it and was intensely miserable the whole time.
So you talked about this being a challenging time. Would you say it was still a dream when you were there?
So it was at first. It absolutely was. It was wonderful. Eventually, in music school, you spend a lot of time with 1 or 2 professors. And for whatever reason, one of them decided they didn't like me. I give good class, I nod and smile, I try really hard, I'm not usually the one that the professor doesn't like. So this was very new for me. It began with eye rolling, and then it began with throwing up their hands at me at something I had said or a way that I'd played. Then eventually it moved into, darn it. Eventually it moved into making fun of me, making fun of the way I play, making fun of the way my choices in life. And then it ended with, or it went into yelling. Largely this was an abusive relationship, and largely this person was bullying in this quiet space of what was supposed to, at least how I see teaching, that it should be a very calm, gentle, growing process. It was bullying, it was just bullying. But I'd always been taught that good Christians turn the other cheek, and I always thought, so I stayed for several reasons. I thought, this is my goal in life, and I will succeed in this because I'm incredibly stubborn, and I have to do this because this person is just a barrier in my path, and I will get over this. And the more that this person yelled, and just turn the other cheek and just keep going. So I did.
So none of us set out to pursue dreams expecting them to break. It didn't turn out how it was designed in Isaiah, and it didn't turn out how you thought in your program. How did it end?
Okay, so that stubborn thing, I decided for some reason that I should stay an additional 4 years and audition for the doctoral program, because we were reaching the end of my master's program. And I went through that audition with lots of prayers and positivity, and I got there and I just played my heart out. And I didn't think necessarily about how a specific person wanted me to play, I just played how I wanted to play. And instead of hearing the bullying and the yelling, this person was nodding and smiling, and so I thought this went well. And this would be fine, and I could totally handle 4 more years with this person. This would be just fine. I could do it. 6 days before my final recital, which is your final leaving your master's program, I received a standard form flush email saying I had not been accepted into the doctoral program. And that was probably some of the best 20 minutes of my life, honest to goodness. Because I sat there reading this email, and I was angry not because I hadn't been accepted, but I was angry because I'd just gotten a flushed email. I just thought, how rude. You see this person 4, 5, 6, 10 hours a week, and they didn't feel comfortable enough speaking to me about this is what could have done better. It was just a standard flesh email. So I sat there, and I can still remember my children are playing off to the side. Jason's probably cooking dinner because I didn't do that a lot during that program. Thank you for that, by the way. And I went through all the stages of grief. I went through denial. I'm reading this wrong. I went through anger. How dare they send me this flesh letter? I skipped bargaining because who was there to bargain with? And then I just sat there and I just felt calm. And I thought, you're miserable. It's hard to go to school. It's hard to get up in the morning. It's hard to deal with this person constantly yelling and bullying and criticizing me and making me feel tiny because she didn't like me. So I realized that no matter what was in my future, being with that person any longer was not being with that person was going to be fabulous, and I was going to be just fine. So though I thought I had this dream of being Dr. Fife, flute professor, it didn't work out, and I think it's absolutely for the best. So, so I went to my husband and I said, so I didn't get in, and I really want to move home. And can we do that? And so we both just decided within the span of a week that we were going to move, everything was going to be great. So I went through my final recital, played my heart out, didn't think about how she wanted me to play, I just played how I wanted to play. And I got an email the next day, please come see me as soon as possible. So I went to her office and expecting the rundown of this note was sharp, this note was, you're always late on this, and you can't come off your rest. And instead, she handed me a letter, and the letter said, you've been accepted to the doctoral program. And I look at her in disbelief because I thought I'd been flushed out. What are you doing? And she said, it is my understanding that you received the wrong response. You were supposed to, I know, right? You were supposed to receive this. So I took a deep breath, I really did, but it took me, instead of 20 minutes this time, it took me 20 seconds to say, no thank you. And we moved. Yeah.
I think I really want to sincerely say thank you for your willingness to share that, because I think while many of us may not be musicians like Rose, I think we all have dreams or expectations of whatever our vineyards or life might look like that end up being different, whether they be broken or shattered. And I think that's exactly where today we heard the first passage of Isaiah end with this beautiful vision of a vineyard being cut down, completely cut down and dead. And then the second passage from Isaiah is this image of Jesse's stump. And that's where it's pretty striking. That's where in our story today we hear that that's exactly where God does God's best work. When we think things are supposed to be done or dead or over. When we think there's no possibility for new life, a stump, if you picture a stump, you see it sitting out on the lawn for years, right? But that's where God promises that new dreams begin. So today, when we come with our own stories, I want you to also think about your own life, just like Rose was willing to share hers today. When we have dreams or expectations and we think it might be over or shattered, what might that new life be from God that God is promising? Because this is actually the whole story of our faith in a nutshell. God created this beautiful garden with all the necessary pieces for life to be fruitful, right? And yet, that dream was broken. And that's where God says, I'm going to bring life from a tree that was cut down. Where everyone thinks life is over, I'm going to bring a new beginning. And today I want to thank you, Rose, for your willingness to share that hope when we might feel hopeless, and being in conversation with us today. So I think we should give Rose one more round of applause of gratitude. And I'm just going to say a prayer if you'd bow your heads with me. God, you are the God of new life. And today we all bring our own expectations, our own dreams. And sometimes we find that they aren't or don't work out the way we hoped or thought they would. Sometimes what was an expectation or a dream ends up broken or different. And God, today I pray for the broken dreams in this place, for the vineyards that have been torn down or those that need to be broken down. But God, I also pray that you'd help us to hear the hope and help us to hear the courage that Rose had to listen to the new calling and the new life. And God, I pray that you'll speak to each of us today with the hope and good news that when we feel like all might be hopeless or lost, it's not an end. You promise a new beginning where we think it's not even possible. So God, give us eyes to see new possibilities where we see broken dreams. Help us to see new beginnings where we see dead ends. And God, when we see death, show us new life. It all came from a cut down tree. God, it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let's join together now and pray the prayer Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Now go in peace, serve the Lord.